The first 100,000, the hardest achievement in personal finance, according to the late great investor Charlie Munger. Only about 20% of Americans have 100K liquid net worth, whether that's saved in retirement accounts or in cash savings, and even less so for younger people in the decade of 25 to 35. Only about 4% of those in that age bracket has 100K. I achieved a net worth of 100K last year when I was 28, and now at age 29, I'm roughly at about 125 to 130K. The journey to reaching six figures for the first time, it was indeed very challenging, but it was also quite simple. Just took some discipline and a plan to reach it, and I was able to do it in just a few years. So that's what I wanted to talk about in today's video, how I made it to 100K. First of all, let's talk about the defense and offense of personal finance. Most sports, if you've ever watched, whether that be football, hockey, baseball, they have defensive and offensive aspects to them. Offense being where you score points or runs or touchdowns or whatever, and defense being where you prevent the opposition from scoring points against you. Defense is usually where most people can make the most immediate changes in their finances, but there's only so far that it can go. Whereas with offense in finance, aka making more money, that can be an infinite thing. That can be, scalable to the moon and back, at least as much as there is time in the game or time in your life. So what do I mean by these things? Well, so for defense, first of all, the defensive aspects of personal finance would be things like living on less than you make. And that means, being frugal with your purchases, living below your means, as in what you bring in is greater than what is going out. Income is greater than outcome. Being frugal doesn't mean you're so cheap to where you can't enjoy life, but it's just being more thoughtful with your purchases. Frugality is more about intentionality. It's not like you're a cheapskate, but looking for a deal here and there, not upgrading to the latest tech, not needing the fanciest car. Those are good frugal decisions. Creating a budget and sticking to it, which that can be more psychological than mathematical. You can plan to spend and save certain amounts, but sometimes life happens and you might be spending more than you think you are. And creating a budget and seeing where all your money is going can be very helpful for this. Also, for a mindset shift, you need to go from consumer to creator. Lower the consumption. It's very easy to be a consumer when marketing is always being shoved in your face every single day on social media. New products, always coming out and trying to tempt you to buy. But change the mindset from consumer to creator. Try to create value in the world because that's where real wealth is created. When it comes to offense for personal finance, this could be through things like making more income through raises, creating side hustle. For me, like my income, it was never crazy high during my journey to six figures. I'm talking like maybe 60 to 70K the last few years between all streams of income. I know some people can easily make way more than that in their early 20s with some of the skills they have, whether that be in tech fields or some of the trades, or even if they have a lot of extra time to really side hustle. Another aspect of offense can be starting a business. And this is where, as I mentioned earlier, the upside can start to become limitless. If you can scale your business, the amount of revenue you bring in, where it's no longer tied to your effort, that can be a very powerful thing. Like you make a YouTube video that keeps on getting views years after you made it, or a digital product or a book, a course online, something that just keeps on selling without any more effort from you. You put in the initial effort, but then it just kind of, makes more money on its own, like a tree just keeps on producing fruit. Or maybe you've hired people to work at your physical business and you just collect dividends, passive income after you've set the system to run on its own or with a manager, something like that. Another aspect of offense, and this is very important, everyone should learn how to do this, investing. And investing is simply putting your money to work to make more money. And this is another limitless aspect of building wealth. If your income is eternally dependent upon your time, as in your hours clocked in at work, you will never be rich. No one ever gets rich off of a salary except maybe the top 1% of salaries. But even then, like the wealthiest people in the world are owners. They have a mindset of ownership and entrepreneurship, not employeeship, where you show up to work to get a paycheck, you put in time for money. But yeah, you need to put your money to work for you instead of working for money. Everyone has to start initially trading their time for money. But as you go on in life, you want to think about ways to let your money produce more money so that you can buy back your time later in life. Not having to show up at a job to slave away for money, that can be a very powerful position to be in. Think about how much time you can reclaim if you didn't have to work for money. Now, that doesn't mean you'll stop working altogether, but maybe you'll move on to a next endeavor where you're working in something that you enjoy, like creating a YouTube channel, for example, or doing something else besides the job that you hate. You'll have more control over your time, and life will be more meaningful. How long does it take to reach 100K? Well, that's largely going to depend upon your income, your savings rate, yeah, how much realistically that you can set aside in a month and invest. If you run some numbers on a compound interest calculator, this can be very easy to figure out for you. What can you realistically save in a month? Is it $100, $500, 1,000, 2,000? Um, if you wanted to save 100K in 10 years, and this is with investing with a 10% return, 10 years, I feel like it's a pretty simple an amount of money that most people could realistically do in their 20s. That is $523 a month to hit 100K in 10 years. For 5 years, it'll take a little bit more discipline with saving. And that amount of time, you would need to invest $1,365 a month. In 3 years, that requires a little bit even more of a crunch. But I mean, if you live with your family, have good defense and offense, with income and saving, you would hit 100,000 in 3 years by saving about $2,518 a month. 3 years is roughly what it took me. Keep in mind, I didn't necessarily start with $0 on my financial independence journey. Had about 10,000 in an emergency fund about 3 years ago. For most of my early to mid 20s, I would say maybe from like 22 to 25, I hit about like $10,000 in savings, and then I didn't really know what to do with the rest of my money. So I would spend it, upgrading tech or like buying new guitars and stuff like that, kind of just being wasteful with my money because I didn't really understand investing and how that worked yet. But yeah, for me, going from roughly 10K to 100K, it took even less than 3 years. And I was saving roughly about 2 grand a month, sometimes 2,500, sometimes 3,000 on a really good month. I was very fortunate with good investment returns. The last 3 years, I believe, were about 20, 22%, and like 16% in 2025. So pretty above average returns for the S&P 500 at least. No, yeah, I was doing $2,000 a month. I know a lot of people can't necessarily do that. But if you could just save 1,000 or 500, you'll get to the 100,000 saved and invested soon enough. It just might take 5 or 10 years instead of three. But you definitely want to hit this goal as soon as possible. It's also more important that you start building the habit of saving and investing while you're young. And, even when you're not making a huge income. And then when your income does increase, you'll probably be more likely to be disciplined, not to give in to lifestyle inflation when you do make more money later. And don't wait for perfect knowledge to start investing. If you just try and fail and then eventually learn that way, that's great. Starting is more important than overthinking. I definitely recommend low cost index funds, but I mean, if you start out with some individual stocks or crypto and then lose, that can be good for you because then you'll learn, what not to do, or you might form your own investing strategy. So, lastly, in the video, I want to talk about what it means to have 100K and why should you want to pursue it as fast as possible. There's a great book by J.L. Collins called The Simple Path to Wealth. And I don't know if he was the first one to coin that term FU money, but I definitely remember that term from his book. And he kind of fleshes out that idea of FU money. In other words, it's enough money where you can say FU to your situation. Maybe not literally. You probably don't literally need to angrily cuss someone out and burn your bridges at like your employer or with friends or anything. But, basically the idea is with FU money, if you need to, you can proverbially say, F you, peace out, I'm out of here. I don't need this. I don't need to be here to a job, a circumstance, whatever. You don't need to be there because you have some money set aside to fall back on a rainy day. And that can be a very powerful position to be in, where if your job is getting really, really toxic, but you have 100,000 or even just 50,000, it might depend on your circumstance too, like how much is a decent amount of FU money for you. You can just piece out of your situation, be okay for a few months or a year or 2 years or whatever. That's what FU money is. Um, Also, even more than that, 100,000 by age 30 should easily make you a millionaire in your 50s, even if you don't contribute anything more. And if you do continue to contribute, you'll probably be a millionaire in your early 40s even. Now, I know that these numbers, $100,000, $1 million even, it's not what it used to be. Sure, inflation has diminished the purchasing power of it, but you are going to retire one day and you will need to hit this milestone at some point in your life. So you might as well start while you are young and your potential for compounding is much higher. After that first 100K, you really begin to see the fruits of your labor because investment returns often will outpace what you can save. Now, if you're saving $2,000 a month, then sure, a 10% return on 100,000 is still less than what you'd be contributing. But most people don't even save 10,000 a year. And so, having $100,000 and getting that 10% return on average, which is 10,000, that's more than most people can even save in a year, all for doing nothing. That's where it feels like investment returns are actually meaningful, and you're not just kind of putting money into nothing anymore. It's like, okay, we're actually getting the ball rolling. I can see the progress tangibly. And that's why I think 100K is a very important milestone to hit. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you're comfortable sharing your net worth and your age, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you guys and just how you did it, what you're doing to increase your income and net worth. Yeah, thank you guys for watching. Until next time.